The Hearts of Gold podcast is brought to you by the Grow and Share Network, produced by Off the Walter Media.
Welcome to Hearts of Gold. Today we have Pepper with us. Hi, Pepper.
Hi.
Can you tell us about your Girl Scout Gold Award project?
I started my Gold Award project, I think my senior year of high school, and around the fall. So basically what the intention was is to bring aviation into my community for young women. So I started flying when I was about 10 years old through a program called the Experimental Aircraft Association, which is a predominantly male program that consisted of a lot of older gentlemen that were giving opportunities for young people to get a chance in an aircraft and to see what that's like. And so when I was 10, I took my first flight with the AA, and it was a super cool experience. It's really cheesy, but I like to say it was my love at first flight or whatever. So that basically really ignited a passion for aviation. And so I continued in that program, and I, really, my parents were super supportive, and I joined the Civil Air Patrol as well. But a lot of those programs are very male dominated. And so as a part of and I didn't really have any female role models as a young pilot, especially in my teen and when I started flight training when I was 15. And so I wanted to give young women in my community an opportunity to, number one, get introduced to aviation, and number two, develop resources and meet a woman pilot and other women pilots, because not only me, but I also brought in some women from my community, which I'll talk about, to talk to the girls as well. So in order to do this, I hosted a series of 3 workshops in different areas around my community, which was Southwest Florida. So I'm from Fort Myers, and so I hosted programs, 1 workshop in Fort Myers, 1 workshop in Naples, and then 1 workshop in Punta Gorda. And those were all 30 minutes from each other, an hour or so. And so I wanted to go to different areas to expose different young women and, try to reach as big of an area as I could. These workshops were about half a day, where the girls did a variety of programs. A lot of the lessons were led by me. So I taught them about basics of flight, 4 forces, aerodynamics, Bernoulli's principle, how lift works. Taught them about the parts of the aircraft, how to flight plan, and then how to get their pilot's license or the first steps. And then we did a couple activities. For example, one of the programs or each of the workshops, there was they got to build their own airfoil, which was pretty cool. So they got to use some woodworking tools, and they got to build their own airfoil, which is basically just a cross section of a wing. So they got to build that. They got to flight plan themselves. I walked them through how to, plan a flight from KFMY to KPGD and how far that was, how much fuel you need, which is a lot for a lot of the kids because they range from anywhere. I think my youngest was 10, although I aimed for middle to high school students. But I think I did have a 10-year-old at one of mine. It was a little bit much for a lot of those younger kids, but they still did it, and I think it was a great learning experience. And so just a variety of activities as well. And then I brought in some women speakers in my community, for example, from the 99s, which is a all women's pilot organization, which I'm a part of. And so I brought some of my colleagues from there, and they talked about their experience, how they got into aviation, anywhere from corporate pilots, commercial pilots to private pilots and just people who fly for fun. So, and I like giving that range as well. So I had those 3 workshops, and then I had what I call a fly day. And I can go into this more later in the podcast, but the Girl Scouts used to have a aviation program that got discontinued due to several reasons, not that aren't really explained very well, but mostly legality issues. And in that program, Girl Scouts could fly in these aircraft and get their pilot's license, which is pretty cool. Obviously, regulations change. The FAA is now a thing, which is the Federal Aviation Administration. So a lot more roadblocks in the way. But I partnered with the 99s, which again is an all-women's pilot organization, Paradise Coast 99s, which is the chapter in my area. I partnered with them and some of my pilot colleagues, like my mentor. His name's Bob DiCello. He's an incredible man. He's great. So I had a couple of my 99s friends and him take some of my girls up flights. So overall, I think about like 40 girls in total attended the workshops, and about 30 of them got to go to the fly day and got to experience being in a small aircraft. So, and again, that's what really got me started in like the whole aviation thing. So I think exposing them to that was just cool to begin with, because I think that's really like where you see if you are into aviation or not. It's like you got to be in the plane, you know. But yeah, and so those were like, that was the hands-on aspect of my project. And then aside from that, I also created a petition and a advocacy letter, a proposal basically for GSUSA, or the Girl Scouts of the USA. And that basically just outlined why I believe that there should be more aviation-oriented programs in Girl Scouting, because we have other programs like cybersecurity. We have very little engineering, actually, but we do have engineering. We have tech. We have coding. We have chemistry, science. And they're really big advocates for STEM and business and everything, and exploring different career paths. But aviation is just one that was kind of neglected, even though it was, a program in the past. So I basically outlined an advocacy letter of why I think that they should reinstate such a program, or at least have an aviation like badge, that maybe doesn't like explicitly, isn't having roles like Girl Scouts liable for any flights, but is encouraging young women to like explore that career opportunity. So that was like basically the entirety of my project. A lot of aspects, a lot of components, but yeah, it was definitely something that I was really passionate about. Aviation. I'm a pilot, so that was definitely like what propelled me to do this project. But and it was super awesome seeing all the girls and how interested they were in all of the concepts and activities that we did.
Can you tell us about your experience in how you first started taking pilot lessons, what it was like when you did that first solo and got your official license, and up till where you are now, because you just got another certification recently?
And again, neither of my parents are pilots. So it was really just like a weird, like one-off thing that I did. But my parents are super supportive. So I took that first flight when I was 10. I loved it. It was amazing. I felt like, when we took off, like I could feel my stomach kind of rise, or like butterflies, because of like how cool it was. And it was just like a crazy experience that I like was never used to, like you don't just normally go in a plane. And so, but again, it was like a mix of scared and like excited and nervous. There was like a lot of things, but I knew that this is like something that was super cool as a 10-year-old. And I was like, this is pretty sick. And so again, like I said, my parents encouraged me to continue with this, and they've always been encouraging, which is awesome growing up, especially since I didn't have many female mentors until I was older. I joined EAA. I joined Civil Air Patrol, which is a more military-based program, because one of my options was going into the Naval Academy or like the military to pursue aviation, which is a great option. It just didn't end up being for me. However, I started with Civil Air Patrol. I worked my way up in the ranks really quick in that, and I was able to attend like Glider Academy, which is a program in Northeast region, which is in like Vermont area. And so I got to fly. I got a scholarship for that, which I got to fly for like a glider, which is a non-powered plane. So again, a lot of super cool opportunities in those kind of programs. And EAA, again, I got another small scholarship to go to like a camp that was like aviation based in Lakeland, Florida. So yeah, a lot of small programs that like kind of propelled me, kept me going. And then when I was 15, you can get your pilot's license at 17. And so that's like the youngest you can be when you obtain your like powered license. And so powered single engine, sorry. And so when I was 15, I just decided that I wanted to start training officially, because a mentor of mine, as I mentioned before, his name is Bob DiCello. I met him through the Experimental Aircraft Association. And so he was basically mentoring me from like the age of 12 to like 15. And he was like flying with me pretty regularly. he had like a small single engine, like really tiny Aerotrack, which is a light sport plane, super light, fiberglass windows. So like entire doors, like glass or like fiberglass. It's super beautiful aircraft. But he was basically mentoring me in that, teaching me the basics. And then I started flight training when I was 15. One big barrier for me was finances, because my family does not come from money or anything. So I applied for a lot of scholarships to try to like, allow me to pursue this. And I ended up getting a scholarship through AOPA, which is the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. And it was specifically for high school students, which is pretty cool. And so that was in $10,000. And so I was able to put all of that toward my private pilot training. Again, I did do it in high school. So like that was also really hard. With doing it while I'm like studying and, in difficult classes, because I'm also an engineering major at college. So I wanted to go into engineering. Like, yeah, it was a lot. But I switched to dual enrollment, which is like college classes in high school. So at my local like state college. And so I was able to do that and fly. My first solo was, for your first solo, basically all you do is you take off, solo being you fly by yourself for the first time. You take off, you do 3 laps in the pattern, which is just like you do a box around the runway, and then you come back in the land, and that's it. And so first solo was super cool. It felt really weird being able to fly by myself. It felt lighter, right? Because you have one person instead of 2. And so yeah, just like a super surreal experience. It's also like a big confidence booster, because like I was scared that, like, am I going to be able to do this like on my own, despite all the training that I had? And I had a lot of roadblocks leading up to my solo. Like there's this one part of landing that I was having a really hard time with, called the flare, which is like right before you land, you have to pull back on the yoke a little bit, and then you touch down, so that your front wheel doesn't hit, because the front wheel is really fragile, basically on like small aircraft. And I had a really hard time with that. So my solo was kind of nerve-wracking, because I was like, can I do this? Like, am I good enough? I did it, and it was fine, and it went great actually. So, and then you can do a couple more things to achieve your pilot license. So you do your solo, your cross-country solo, which is like 50 miles or more, which that was a good story, because it was very windy that day, and I probably shouldn't have flown, but I did. And it was a super good learning experience, but that was definitely nerve-wracking. So I did solo, cross-country solo, and then when I was certified by my instructor to take my exam, you take an oral portion, which is like sit down, like they test you on like scenario-based stuff and like knowledge, and then you take a practical. And before those 2, you had to take a written exam. So it's a lot of like exams at the end. And it's basically the format for all of it, for all of your pilot license and ratings and stuff. So, yeah. And I even failed my first practical exam because I was so nervous. And I had to retake a portion of my practical. Definitely a lot of roadblocks in the way when I was getting my pilot license, but I eventually did it at 17, a couple months after my birthday, which was pretty cool. So freshly 17, and I was able to complete it in March of 2021, I think. Either 2021 or 2022. I think it was 2021, because I was a junior in high school. Yeah. But yeah, and then recently I completed my instrument flight rating, which is basically an add-on certification that allows me to fly in inclement weather. So like in clouds, in rain, fog, like low visibility, that kind of thing. And so that is a rating. That's actually one of the harder ratings in aviation, because it's a lot more information, and it's separate from pilot license, like your basic private pilot license information. So it's like all new, and it's all like supplemental to all the stuff you learned in your private pilot training. So, and like you do all of it like without being able to see outside. So super crazy stuff. But I took that exam this past summer when I was in Alabama, because I was at space camp as a camp counselor for their aviation program. So I did that like at the same time, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so I love flying, and I'm grateful that I still get to do it. Mostly with the help of like scholarships and just like sheer willpower. because I think a big misconception about aviation is like, and that's the thing that I tried to introduce to the girls that I was teaching, was like, aviation is much more than just flying. It's also really big academically. You need to study, you need to like have a lot of grit, like academically, so that you can memorize, study, and like be able to comprehend like pretty advanced concepts, like about weather, about the mechanics of the engine, about electrical systems, and like be able to analyze maps. And yeah, there's a lot going into it, a lot more than just flying the plane, but flying the plane is the fun part.
I'm really glad that you brought up the scholarships. Not only is flying itself an expensive hobby, in addition, I believe I understand that because you have this interest and because you're a female pilot, and like you've said, there's not as many female pilots, and the work that you've done with your Gold Award and just all your training that you did before you graduated high school, you are eligible for other scholarships. So can you talk to us both about how, I mean, you talked a little bit about like some of your camp scholarships and such, but can you talk about the costs that go into your training and then the opportunities even outside of the scholarships that you got directly for those trainings and where it's taking you?
Aviation is so expensive. That's why it's predominant. Like a lot of the men that I was surrounded, or people I was surrounded by growing up in like pursuing this field, were either career pilots that like are going strictly towards commercial aviation. Like they did it out of high school, they took out loans, and that's what they want. Like that's directly what they want to do, which is a great path. Or they're retired pilots people who had a career, retired, had money, and then used that to get their pilot license, like at an older age. That's what a lot of the EAA gentlemen were, which they were great mentors, but they were not young women in high school pursuing their pilot license. So definitely way different demographic for sure, which is why it was hard for me, because I didn't really know, like, can I do it this young? Like nobody else around me is doing it this young. Like, is this okay? Like, is this normal? Am I doing anything wrong? You know? And that's why the 99s was super important to me, is because it was just like a lot of younger women, and older women, but people who had completely different career paths, different lives. A lot of them were just like either just recreational pilots or they were career pilots, a good mix. So yeah, super diverse group of women. It was great. And they also had a lot of scholarships. There's tons out there. My private pilot license, since I've been in high school, it took quite a while because it took about a year and a half for me to complete it. Again, I had a lot of roadblocks, and I also had a lot of like mental blocks, just like because I was a teenager. And like, again, I was doing school and like a lot of different extracurriculars and stuff. So it was hectic. In total, my pilot license was about 16,000, which is a lot. And again, 10 of that was from the AOPA scholarship, 10,000, which was gifted to me. And then I have another, like, it's a weird scholarship called Jack Kent Cook, the Jack Kent Cook Youth Foundation. And they helped pay for the other 6,000. And that's basically just like a program that allows, I got it when I was in 7th grade. It basically like allowed me to pursue different extracurriculars towards like my collegiate application. So basically they helped me look good for college is what it is basically. And then like sponsored things as a student in high school, which is a great program. I also highly recommend that for anyone who's younger, like 7th grade, or they also have a college scholarship as well. And then a little bit was out of my parents and my own pocket. I far completely out of my own pocket. Which sucked, honestly, because I didn't take out a loan. But a lot of people do, you know? So again, for any like young people watching, loans are scary, like money is scary, but look for the scholarships, because there are so many, especially for women and especially for young high school women, especially those like introductory, like private pilot, instrument rating. They love to see young women, and they love to see who are eager, and they love to see women who like have goals in mind, like career aspirations. right now, I think I would be an engineer, but with like that teaches people how to fly. So like kind of like a side hustle thing, like as a certified flight instructor. But for a long time, I wanted to be a commercial pilot. And for a while, I even wanted to go into the military and be a fighter pilot. That was a crazy trajectory, and obviously it changes. At least for me, it did. But yeah, but there's also opportunities like the military that will pay for your pilot license, will pay for you to get all that. But in return, you just have to, do a certain amount of time in the service, which I think is a decent trade-off. And since I got my pilot license so young, I felt like I'd have to redo all of that in pilot training for the military. So, which I didn't really love. But I think especially if you're like an older, high schooler who wants to go into the military, or you feel that as a trajectory for you, then getting your pilot license through the military is a great option. And you can fly fighter jets, you can fly cargos. It's great. They have a good gig out there for sure.
You've talked a lot about how much you had to balance during your high school. How did you do that balancing act?
I was just used to it from a young age because I was a very ambitious middle schooler and a very ambitious elementary schooler. And I had a very ambitious mom and dad who wanted the best for me. I was a very extroverted kid. And so I loved talking to people. I loved doing everything. I was really interested in everything. I was even like, when I was little, I even like did dance and cheer for a while. I did cheer until I was like 11. And then I did theater for a lot of my life. And I did aviation and I did cheer and lacrosse in high school. And yeah, so I was very involved. But I think a lot of it was, number one, my Google Calendar. I love my Google Calendar. And then I get a big part of like my junior and senior year, which were super busy, was like knowing what priorities I wanted. And then also switching to dual enrollment, at least for me, was a big deal. Because then I only had like a couple classes a day, like two to three a day. And I had that morning time and I had the evening time where I could go to school, do extracurriculars, or I could fly really early in the morning, or I could fly on weekends as well. It was definitely difficult, but I don't regret it at all. I don't regret pushing myself because I feel like that also prepared me really well for college. Because I do a lot here at Rice as well. I attend Rice University in Houston, Texas, and as I said, I'm an engineering major, but I also want to do like astrophysics as well, which is super interesting to me. And I'm on the bike team, and I'm still trying to fly a little bit. I'm trying to be involved in my like residential college. So like there's a lot going on, but definitely like that perseverance and like motivation I had in high school definitely helped me here. Because again, it was like time management and my Google Calendar and like, but it was also how much I wanted it and like the grit and the motivation that got me there. Because like I definitely had goals and I really wanted to achieve them. So that definitely helped as well.
Can you tell us about your conversations with GSUSA and getting aviation back into Girl Scouts? What you did during your project and then where that is at today?
I had a meeting with GSUSA programming actually, because I sent my proposal to them with the petition that I created, and it took a while. I just sent it to a couple of different people to get a response, but then actually set up a meeting with me with their program council, which is pretty cool, and or like their curriculum council as well. And basically what they said in that meeting was, number one, there's a lot of logistical like legal stuff that goes into that, which I understand from a like aviation standpoint, because of course like aviation is big liability. There's people on planes, of course, and like especially young children, that is definitely a concern. However, they do have a lawyer that they're talking to right now, and that basically handles a lot of those legal things. And it looks like it's just more of like a battle of seeing if it's possible for Girl Scouts to like be able to sponsor those type of activities, because then Girl Scouts will be liable for anything that happens like under their programming. However, I think I definitely advocated that there should still be some sort of aviation badge that encourages girls to pursue those opportunities and like connects them with resources like the 99s, like EAA, like Civil Air Patrol. Because right now there's not. And there's councils that are encouraging this, and like there's partnerships with the Women in Aviation International, or WAI, which is great, but I feel like there's not enough in Girl Scouts itself. And so that's what I was basically advocating for in that meeting. And they're definitely making progress on it. They said that they project sometime between 2025 and 2030 that they expect to have a badge released, or some sort of programming for aviation. But again, it's a lot of like, with Girl Scouting, there's a lot of like small committees that things have to go through to be approved, especially for like big badges like that, and like additions to their curriculum. So unfortunately, it is a while before something like that is created. But again, there are a lot of like councils that are making patches and programming within themselves to encourage aviation. Like in the San Jacinto Council here in Houston, they had a aviation day at the Lone Star Museum, and that I had the pleasure of. They invited me out there. I connected with them, and they invited me out there to talk to some of their kids who were at that program, which were all like middle to high school age girls, which is really awesome, and some even younger. And I got to talk to them about, what got me into aviation and why it's such a great career field, and why they should pursue it, and basically how I got there. But it's those kind of councils who are doing those patch programs and like encouraging it now. It's awesome. And I hope that GSUSA in the near future can follow in those council's footsteps.
Do you have any special memories from when you were working on your Gold Award project?
Fly Day, that was definitely really awesome. The girls were super excited. I think that they didn't really know what to expect. I also had a lot of young women at the Fly Day who wanted to like sign up for IACRA, which is a program that's like the federal aviation program that allows them to like get approved for their student pilot certificate, which allows them to start training. So there's a lot of girls who were like super eager about that, and I loved it. But I loved collaborating with the 99 on that. That was awesome. I got to see all of my like awesome lady pilot friends. They were all great. But yeah, definitely seeing those kids like get in the plane and then come back and be like, have the light in their eyes that I did, when I first went up. So that was definitely awesome. And then also getting that opportunity to meet with the program council and the curriculum council at GSUSA, because I think it was awesome to like see that they were actually like serious about it, and they actually wanted to talk to me and not just like, oh, they see an email and they're like, okay, like, oh, whatever. It was like they actually care, and they want to create those kinds of programs. But I understand that it just takes time. But that was definitely super awesome getting to meet with them.
What was your biggest challenge during your project, and how did you overcome it?
It was definitely a time commitment. I probably spent over 120 hours on my project when the minimum was 80, because I wanted to make it really engaging and comprehensive for the kids for the workshops. And so that went into a lot of like, we laminated like sectional maps, and we printed out stuff, and I connected with different organizations, and I had to contact all of the FBOs to make sure that I could use their facilities, like the airport facilities, to like host these events. So yeah, definitely like the prep was definitely difficult, and making the time and like blocking out how much time everything was going to take, because it was such a time consuming project. But it was super rewarding as well. So I don't regret at all any of the time that it was put into it. I loved every second of it, but a lot of like the cutting and laminating got a little tedious. So I think definitely just reminding myself of what like the end goal was, and who this was gonna affect, and like young women could get inspired to pursue aviation like I did.
What else would you like to share with the audience?
To try everything, to get a little taste of a bunch of different career paths. I think one thing that, because if I'd never been exposed to aviation, I would probably be on like a medical track or something, which I know that I would not have enjoyed. I regret even now in college that because I've been on, since I started aviation, I've like been on that like very narrow path. But now in college, I'm able to I'm able to take different classes like philosophy and like, a religion class, or I think I'm taking a psychology class right now, so being able to experiment in that way. And I'm finding that I'm interested in psychology and like the study of the brain, but like, I was so like focused on aviation and like engineering for a while that like tasting other paths wasn't really like an option. But I'd say definitely sample everything. Because again, I didn't get into aviation until my mom and I like went to a meeting and I flew in a plane for the first time. Like, it's very spontaneous, but I think take those spontaneous risks, and try new things, because you'll never know what you might end up pursuing is like an actual path.
How do you make your s'mores?
I always burn my marshmallows. I want it black on the outside with 2 nice thick graham crackers and a nice thick piece of chocolate, sometimes Reese's.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I was so happy to be on here.
Make sure to click follow or subscribe so you always know when new episodes are released. Power your passion and conquer your challenges.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to be on the show to share your story of how you earned your Gold Award, reach out and send an email to growandsshare@outlook.com. Be sure to catch up on our previous shows on any of your favorite podcasting platforms, as well as view the full video versions at youtube.com/Cheryl M. Robinson. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.